let's move into our main topic, Dadman. So, we did a review, which by the time we air this, will be posted up on the Batmandrew channel, Final Fantasy 16. And in that, we talked about some of our theories about how the game ended. And one of the theories you had, I've been absolutely obsessed with. And thinking about, especially especially in regards to the direction Final Fantasy should go or can go, with 17 and on. I think that
Mhm.
it's a very interesting theory, right? So we're going to save the best for last. So we're going to get to that one here in a minute, but we're going to knock down a couple of the more like one, what I think is an original theory of mine. I haven't seen it elsewhere out there, but I'm sure it is. There's really nothing, very, very little that's original under the sun nowadays, right? But we're also going to talk about a couple of other big fan theories and kind of get digest them a little bit and see what our thoughts are. So first one's first. I was just sitting around playing Final Fantasy 16. I thought to myself, what if all these games, the multiverse of Final Fantasy, 1 through 16, all the installments, what if it was just a kid at home named Sid playing with his toys, Toy Story style, if you will, with Andy and then Woody and Buzz. Um, and all of this was just an imagination and made up into Sid's head. And all we're doing is living out his childhood imagination. Obviously, is that going to come to fruition? No, right? But it's just kind of a fun theory in my head and the way to kind of connect these games. Because even playing 9 right now, I mean, minor spoiler if you care about those kind of things, but Zidane walks into a weapon shop and he talks to a guy looking at some swords on the wall, and the guy says, yeah, I remember a spiky haired blonde guy that used to carry a big sword like that. Clearly talking about Cloud, right?
Right.
And so you see some of the connections. There's always a Sid, minus the first game. I don't think there was a Sid in Final Fantasy 1, but there's always a Sid. There's always chocobos. There's always moguls. There's always airships, and vehicles of some form or fashion. And I sit there thinking, I was like, man, it's like it would be really cool, really like to just think about the fact that we're just all we're doing is living out the daydreams of some kid named Sid. And as you got progressive through the games, look at Final Fantasy 16, a very much darker tone, which kind
Mhm.
of to me represents where you went from where Sid's first entry, I believe it was in 2, to now in 16, the maturity level of a kid growing up, right? And so I don't know. I thought it was kind of a fun idea. About Sid and living out his imagination through the course of these games. But what do you think of the connective tissue, Dad Man, of these Final Fantasy games? Why is there a Sid in every game, and is he of somewhat importance to the multiverse?
Well, first of all, I love your theory. I think that's such a cool theory. And it's so funny because so there is no physical representation of Sid in the original Final Fantasy. There's no character named Sid. But when you go to the village where you have to translate their speech, there's a one-off conversation with an NPC when they're talking about like your airship, and they say that Sid is the one who created the airship. So
Oh, okay.
there's no like actual character Sid in the game, but the name Sid is mentioned as the person who created the airship. So that's so funny you say that, like, oh yeah, what those are his toys and these are his little characters that he's making. Um, it's also really funny because the bad kid from Toy Story, his name was Sid too. So maybe Andy's over there playing with Woody and Buzz, and Sid's blowing shit up playing Final Fantasy in his closet or whatever, his room or
That's
whatever. But
fantastic.
I
That's why you
I
get all
love
those
it
fucked
too
up, weird
because
looking monsters.
yeah, exactly. The
Yeah.
baby with the spider head,
Uh huh.
like hey, those are the creatures.
Because listen, I will tell
But
you right
I
now, what is Marlboro? That thing's a fucking nightmare, man. Like that
oh
is
yeah, that thing is
so.
terrifying. But yeah, the other thing too is so funny because like you said, like as you get later into the franchise, like the titles get darker. And if you look at 9, we're just talking about 9, right? 9 is a lot more like coming off of 6, 7, and 8. 9 is a lot more lighthearted than those other three
Yeah.
because it's like paying homage to, like the original, but it's also like kind of dead center, like in the middle, which is like midlife crisis. So maybe Sid's going through his midlife
Yeah.
crisis. He wants to go back to his fairy tale like childhood, go to back to 9, and he gives us that. And then I think 10 is when he gets married and starts having kids because that story was just so freaking beautiful. Um, And then I'll blame Final Fantasy 13 on COVID because it was not the great. So maybe he was just kind of mailing it in a little bit. But yeah, I love that theory, man. I think it's so cool. And like I'm one of those people who like I understand that they say that none of the Final Fantasies are connected, but I think they are connected in some way. Like they have to be, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to talk about that in a big way when we get to your theory at the end, but yeah, I agree, man. I think that even if they're just Easter eggs, which obviously there probably just are. I think the idea of there being a Final Fantasy multiverse out there. I mean, we've seen characters cross over in like side platform games and stuff like that, but to me the idea that this is a much bigger universe I think is really cool, and I think it opens up the door for things that Square could do down the road. But talking about some of that cross-platform stuff, I heard this whenever Final Fantasy X-2 came out, but I don't think I got far enough into the game to have seen it or whatever. But in Final Fantasy X-2, apparently there is a Albed named Shinra in Final Fantasy
Mm-hmm.
X-2, and the idea is that he extracted energy from the far plane, which eventually led into the Shinra Electric Power Company, and him being the founder. And in essence, the Farplane energy became Mako in Final Fantasy VII. So the theory goes is that Final Fantasy X-2 is nothing but a prequel set hundreds and hundreds of years prior to Final Fantasy VII. And when you think about it, I mean, I could see the connection in the dots. I honestly could, right? Like, I think that this theory is true. No, I think it was just an Easter egg, like most. But you look at the state of the world that you get, especially when you're in Midgar and they're draining the life out of the planet and things like that, versus what Tidus and Yuna and the rest of them, strove to fight for, and especially Waka and his hate for Machina and the Outbed and things like that. I could see the merit in this. I mean, the Outbed was all about machinery and things like that. So the fact that the Shinra Power Company was an origin of the Outbed, I could see that 100%. I really could. So have you heard this theory? And if you have, like, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I've totally heard this theory before. I think it's super interesting, connecting Spira and I think it's Gaia in Final Fantasy VII,
Gaia.
like
Yep.
connecting those two worlds. It's also like if you're looking at party construction, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think both games have the same number of party usable party members. Because 10 has 7 party members or six. One, two,
So
three,
you got
six,
Yuna,
six party members,
Tidus.
right?
Yeah, six. Yeah. Well,
And then
no.
7
So you got
has
Yuna, Tidus, Auron, Waka, Riku, Kamari, and Lulu. So you got seven.
Okay, so you have 7, which is another
Yeah.
7, Final Fantasy
Yeah.
7. But
Yeah.
I think you also have the same amount of party members in 7 because you have Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, you have Red 13, Vincent, Sid, and Vince. I already
Yuffie.
said some, Sid and Yuffie is 7. You
Yeah.
have Aerith, but she dies. Spoiler alert. I think you have the same amount of party members, and you also have like if you look at the jobs, like or if you look at their classifications, you have similar classifications. Like Cloud and Tidus are the same. Yuna and Aerith are the same. Yuffie and Waka are like your long range characters. You could also throw Barrett in there as well. You have your dark characters like Vincent and Lulu. They're pretty the same. You have your Tifa and Riku are the same kind of like with their punching and fists and stuff like that. And then of
Yeah.
course you have Kamari and 13. Like they're both
Yeah.
dogs or cat or whatever they are, right? So there's a lot of similar parallels to it. It's also the development teams, right? The development teams are usually the same. Like if it's like Tetsuya Nomura, like he usually has like a lot of representation in his games. He did 7, 8, 10, and I think 15. So like those games are like very similarly like related to each other in certain ways. But I think it's fascinating. I think along the lines of like you said earlier, like there's a lot of Easter eggs sprinkled throughout that just kind of get our juices flowing as fans, which is it's genius on Square's part because they just want us to continue to have these conversations, right?
Yeah.
But there obviously there's no like confirmation of it, but it's nice to talk about for sure.
Yeah, I think it's cool, man. I think the fun Easter egg part was I had to look up the photo, but in the remake of Final Fantasy VII, there's a picture of clearly what is a Albed, um, uniformed wearing individual in the founding photo or whatever of Shinra Power Company. So
Hmm.
I think it's an interesting theory. I like it. I think it's fun to see those kind of connections and those dots, and I think that this again speaks to how they kind of connect these games and give us those fun little Easter eggs. But I will tell you the next theory that we're going to talk about. I need to replay. It comes from Final Fantasy VIII. I need to replay Final Fantasy VIII because it's been a long time since I've played that game. But with that being said, from what I remember from the game, I think I buy into this theory. I do. I really do. So we're okay. So this is the Squall is dead theory. So
Hmm.
in Final Fantasy VII, or excuse me, Final Fantasy VIII, at the end of Disc One, Squall is impaled by Ida with a massive chunk of ice, and he wakes up in
Hmm.
Disc Two, and there's no wound and no explanation to his
Hmm.
his injury, right? Which
Hmm.
on the surface you don't think much of it because especially if you at the time, multiple disc was not commonplace. Final Fantasy VII did it, but it wasn't like every game did it. So I still remember opening Final Fantasy VIII and be like, "Holy shit, there's four of these discs! Like,
Four,
oh my
yeah,
god!"
four of them. Yeah.
And so getting done with that first disc, you're like, "Oh my god, what a cliffhanger!" You put in that second disc, you're like, "Oh, thank God he's alive!" Right? Like so. Um, but now as an adult, starting to think about that theory, Final Fantasy VIII, I think for me, it takes a lot of fucking weird turns after that second disc, man.
Yeah,
And
it
and
does.
I think it's wonky enough that um now the I guess the rebuttal to this theory would be okay, well in what purpose does that serve then, if he did die and we still see everything kind of play out the way it does. So I don't have an answer to that, but I will tell you, man. Like I remember playing that game as a kid and thinking, oh my god, they killed. Did they kill the main character of this game at the end of disc one? And when you get towards the end of the game, this is where I need to replay it. My notes here are showing that the cinematic ending kind of shows a little bit of a fading of Squall as he kind of
Hmm.
passes away. So what are your thoughts, man? Here, this is your game. This is your entry and your love for Final Fantasy. Do you buy into this theory?
Uh, so there's another really big theory with Final Fantasy VIII that I buy into a whole hell of a lot more, and it's the Renoa is Ultimisia theory.
Mm-hmm.
That one to me is just that one is just like, and they like even like the developers are like, no, that's not true, but like there's so much evidence like supporting that theory. The Squall is dead theory, not really. Like it's a very interesting theory, and you're right. After disc one, it completely goes on like a complete acid trip. I remember, funny story, playing it as a kid, seeing that cutscene and like seeing Squall get impaled with the ice. I thought like it was like a game over, and I had to reset the fight and do the fight all over again. And I
Yeah.
kept doing the fight, and like I didn't understand like why do I keep dying? Like, what am I doing wrong? And then just one day, like, I did the whole thing again, and like, I over leveled my characters. I was like, "There's no way I'm going to lose this fight." And then I got to say, and I just kind of walked away from the PlayStation for a little bit, and then I came back and it said, "Please insert disc 2." And I was like, "Wow, I'm an idiot." Like, whatever. Like, I guess I'll just do this and see where it happens. So yeah, I was relieved to see that start of disc 2. Like, he's good. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like interesting tidbits there too. Like the whole first disc, like Squall is very closed off. He's very standoffish. He wants nothing to do with Renoa in that first disc, and then all of a sudden in disc two, he's like falling in love with her. Obviously, Cypher's not really in the picture anymore, so it kind of like opens that up. But like it's an interesting theory. I don't buy into it as much because the whole point, like the whole storyline, it's a time travel thing, like with the whole time compression. I think like the ultimate pain of Squall, him being that quote unquote legendary seed, where you'll if you play through 8, like Ultimecia will continue having the conversation like, oh, Squall, the legendary seed. I think they're in like a perpetual loop where they have to do this, they have to go fight Ultimecia, and it just keeps repeating constantly. So I think that's where you get all this distortion. I think really that time compression distortion that you see is just multiple attempts of going and beating Ultimecia. They're just kind of getting compressed into one, which is why you get all those weird like images, because multiple different timelines are trying to blend into this one timeline where they actually got it right. Which is, you could kind of like say the same thing about like Infinity War. Like Doctor Strange was like, I looked at 68 billion possibilities and there's only one. Or like if you watched the Flash movie where they're in that weird
Yeah.
paradox and they keep coming back to the same point in time. So I think Final Fantasy VIII has a fixed point in time, and I think that fixed point in time is when Edea kills Squall with the ice shard. So I think that up to that point, everything that has happened has to happen that specific way. And then going into disc 2 is where all of like the parallel timelines happen. So I think there are timelines where Seed failed and doesn't kill Ultimecia. And I think there are timelines where Seed succeeds and kills Ultimecia. But all those different attempts of her time compressing are just kind of blending into each other. And that's why you get the whole like, oh, I'll find you, come find me, don't forget me, remember me. And they go to that one specific spot
Yeah.
in time, not in like reality, but in time, they know where their safe spot is. And I think at the end of the game, everything is fine. But that's where I kind of go off with that theory a little bit. It's very interesting, but I don't buy into that one as much as the Renoa is Ultimecia theory, but it's definitely a good conversation for sure.
I'm gonna need to do a deeper dive into the Renault Aires Ultimecia theory because I've
Oh,
heard it before.
it's so
I've heard
good.
it before.
It's
Yeah.
so good.
I
It's
we,
so
we
good.
might we might have to have like a editorial video on this podcast or something to go over that because I've heard it before. I listen. I love the Renoa character. I think if I'm looking at forget just female characters in Final Fantasy, if I'm talking about my 5 favorite characters of all time in Final Fantasy, I think Renoa is on that top 5 list. I really think that she is. Like I love the Renoa character. Um, and so I don't know. I just in my head I'm like I don't want that to be true because I love the character,
Yeah,
but
it's such a good
I could
theory
see
though.
it. So, but here's our main theory. Here's our main topic of this theory chasing, right? So, Final Fantasy 16. Now, if you want some more review of the game or whatever, like I said, you can go check out my channel. It's going to be up there on the Loot Drop playlist. But for all intents and purposes, Dadman, give us the cliff notes of what this theory is, but enough details so we can kind of flesh it out. So, what is your Final Fantasy 16 theory?
So when I first beat Final Fantasy 16, I love the story. I thought it was very good. I'm not really married to the whole action RPG thing. I'm more of a purist like you. I like the turn based stuff. I like the remake combat system. It kind of blends the two together, and maybe not unfortunately, but that's probably their direction moving forward. They're probably going to have that hybrid like real time turn based mechanic going on. But to me, like Final Fantasy 16 didn't have a lot of like the basic Final Fantasy tropes. Like there was no MP bar, there was no like actual summons. There was, so to me, like that was the, chronologically speaking, that happens first. Like so Clive's story happens first before any of the Final Fantasies, right? Because the whole 16 is destroying the mother crystals, and then the first Final Fantasy is them restoring the crystals to bring magic back and all that shit. So I thought, like, in my like tinfoil hat theory, like this is Square's way of showing us that they're going to reboot like their franchise now, which now, like, the longer we go without getting any information about Final Fantasy 17, the longer I think the truer I think it is. Like I really do think like after we get the third part of the 7 remake trilogy, I think they're going to hit a huge reset, and I think the third part of the 7 remake trilogy is going to like kind of backdoor that in. I really do think they're going to reboot it. I think Final Fantasy 16 is going to be the last numbered entry that you see in Final Fantasy. Like, I don't think there's going to be a Final Fantasy 17. I think there's going to be a Final Fantasy, and then there's going to be like a subtext to it. And I think seven, the third part of seven, is going to like soft reboot everything, and then the next game will like hard reboot everything. And my whole theory behind that is because of the obsession with pop culture and multiverses. So we've always just kind of accepted the fact that Final Fantasy is an anthology series. Well, what if it's not? What if Final Fantasy, and obviously they didn't think about this back in the 80s, but now it can be easily written that instead of it being an anthology story, it's just a multiverse story. Um, and you have games like the Dissidia games where all the characters get together to fight one common enemy. So they kind of hinted at it a little bit of it being like a multiverse thing or like a one shot off thing. But that was my whole like theory about it, is that Final Fantasy 16 is the last game that we got, but it's really the first telling of the franchise. And then Civilization just rediscovering what Clive essentially really took away from the world, which was magic. So that was my like tinfoil hat. Like, this would be a perfect time for them to be like, okay, we're just gonna blow everything up. Final Fantasy is now a multiverse franchise instead of an anthology series. Here's your Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 game. Here's a little bit more into that. And I think because of how popular Sephiroth and Aerith are, I think they're going to be the two characters that really spearhead the cracking of the multiverse. I think I have a strong feeling, especially with the directions that they went in with Rebirth, that there's going to be an Aerith and a Sephiroth thing where something happens and it kind of cracks, like a la like No Way Home. It kind of cracks the fabric of reality, and then boom, here's this birth of this new inception of Final Fantasy.
So this is why I love your theory, right? Because one, I think when you line it all up, it makes sense, right? And I'm sure that there's probably some bigger fan of Final Fantasy than us that's out there that's listening to this. Be like, you guys are fucking idiots. There's no way you could do it, tie into this, whatever,
I
right?
mean, we
Yeah,
could easily be stupid, yeah.
but with that being said, I love the idea of this because that means that the developers, that Square, took a second and laid out a roadmap for where they wanted to take Final Fantasy. And that is something I don't think they've done in years, decades, even. I truly don't. We'll get into that, on our last topic about the current assessment of Final Fantasy. But I love the idea of them saying, hey, okay, we need a direction here, as opposed to just let's develop our next game and move on. Let's have a bigger perspective. And I think what holds merit to your theory is that right now Marvel has defined what cinematic universes should look like. DC's on their second attempt to try to make this fucking thing work for a shared cinematic
Mm-hmm.
universe.
Mm-hmm.
And losing, the millions and millions of dollars that they did on the Snyderverse didn't derail them. They're like, no, fuck it, let's reboot it all. Let's throw all of our money into the multiverse circle, right? People are dying for a shared universe of some sort, right? And I think what Final Fantasy has the opportunity to be able to do is to give us that shared universe without getting rid of their money makers, right? So you could have a world where, and because so I started thinking about this, right? I was like, okay, what characters would I love to see in other worlds? If you could take one character and interact them in a different world with another character, what two characters would I love to be able to see? And there's several, man. There are several. I I would love, like, for me, I think that the craziest Final Fantasy villain that's out there is Kefka. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
he's obviously the most insane of all of them, right? I would love
Mm-hmm.
to see a Kefka in Spira. I would love to see that
Oh
world,
my god.
that peaceful world, like, because man, Kefka made Sin look like a little bitch. Like, if you really compare the two, and I know six is an old game, and if you haven't played it, understand that for me it's a difficult playthrough because of the graphics, right? But get past that, just the core of Kefka man. Like if you're a fan of Sephiroth like I am, like you don't get Sephiroth without Kefka. Like you don't. Like
Correct.
he is a fucking lunatic. I want to see that chaos in another world. With
Yeah, that would be
characters that aren't
crazy.
accustomed to that, right? I think that you have an opportunity here. What I don't want to have happen though is I don't want them just to say, "Oh, cool. Well, let's just have all these characters interact with each other without any clear direction or storyline." Right? I don't
Right.
play any of the games that have these shared crossovers of these shared characters. I don't give a fuck. Like I'm here for the storyline. Give me
Hmm.
a reasonable storyline. And to your point, yeah. So in my head, I was already thinking about that too. Okay, well, like there's really not been much news or anything about anything past Final Fantasy 3, the third installment of this remake trilogy. So
Hmm.
what does that third installment look like, right? And I think if you're going to do this shared universe, if you're going to really open up a multiverse, I think you need a game entry to make it happen, not just the end tag of Final Fantasy 7 3. Um, but I do think that it's going to be like is this all going to happen? Probably not. But in my head, I would love for it to. I
Yeah.
would love for it to be a Final Fantasy 17. But I agree with you. They're not there. I think they're going to scrap the number titles. Even if they don't do this, I think they're done with the number titles. I really do. So whatever Final Fantasy 17 ends up being, I think we're going to see a character we know. Um, Probably Cloud, even though I don't think that's the right move. As much as I love Cloud, I
Hmm.
think it's probably going to be Cloud because he's the arguably the most recognizable character, and I think it's going to be a standalone story of him that will ultimately open up the multiverse. And I think to your point, which I'm at least I'm assuming, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but clearly there's a multiversal element to this Final Fantasy VII remake trilogy. Like the way
Hmm.
that they did Rebirth, going back, especially at the beginning of the game, kind of showing an alternate reality of Zack and Cloud, right
Hmm.
where they live,
Right.
where Zack
Right.
lives. Like clearly, there's a multiverse here. I think we're going to get the end of this trilogy. We're going to get a game that's just Cloud, Final Fantasy, Cloud reigns. I don't know. It's a fucking stupid title, but you get it
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
I
I
got you.
think it's going to be him seeking out, and I think that's going to be what opens up this whole world. And I think we'll see characters that we know and from other installments throughout that story. But I think that's the vision I have. Now, with all that being said, people make a lot more money to do a lot more of this stuff storytelling than me. So I'm probably way off base, but I'm just thinking from a business standpoint because that is my background.
Hmm.
Cloud's your most
Hmm.
marketable character. He is. Him and
Hmm.
Sephiroth. Like my fucking kid knows who Sephiroth is and who knows who Cloud is. And like so these characters are so well known. That's your launching point. I think if you're going to do something like that. Now, who I would love for them to do it with is Clive. I think you do a
Oh.
Clive standalone story. Clive wakes up, whether it's he wakes up on that beach where we think he dies, or we
Yeah.
we fast forward in time. Maybe there's a little bit of amnesia or something that seeks in. He doesn't know who he is, and we get back into his story. That's who I would love to see that centered around because I think that he is a very underutilized character in his own game, if I'm being honest. Like I think that there was
Hmm.
more they could have fleshed out in 16 with him. But that's kind of my thoughts. So with all that being said, do you have anything to add to your theory? Because I absolutely love the theory.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the direction that you're going. The Clive thing is super interesting. I was more along the lines of a completely new character, just like a new character. I don't know like how they would set it up, but this new character has to be like some type of like he has to have or he or she, probably she, because Final Fantasy does female characters really really good. So I would probably say it's a female protagonist that would be the spearhead to the multiversal um the multiversal like story. I would be okay with it not being an original character if it was a character from an existing property that had otherworldly elements. Like I don't think Cloud, as much as I understand the as much as I understand the marketability of Cloud, I don't think like flavor wise it makes sense because he is not he is not like what's a supernatural character.
Yeah.
Like he's not like a Roth who has the Genova cells and is one with the life stream. He's not like an Aerith who was an ancient. He's not like, even if you go outside of Final Fantasy VII, he's not a Tidus who is not even a real person. He's just the dream of the faith. Like he's not that type of a character. So if they're gonna go, I mean, the closest that you get if you're staying in Final Fantasy VII, the two characters that come to mind would be Aerith and Vincent because they have like otherworldly powers, like Vincent being the demonic character in Final Fantasy VII, and Aerith being the angelic character in Final Fantasy VII. But Vincent and Aerith don't really have ties together as characters because
Yeah.
in the original game, by the time you get to Vincent, Aerith's already gone. So I don't even think they have any interactions. So it'd be very interesting to see how they spin it. Um, but yeah, I would be okay with it being an existing character if that character had some supernatural weight to it. Like as much as we don't even like, as much as Final Fantasy 13 gets shit on, I think Lightning would be a good character too because she started as the protagonist. She became a Lassie or Falsi, whatever, that she became
Yeah.
crystallized, and then she comes back. So she has that connection to both like the non-supernatural and the supernatural. So I would even be okay with it. I think that's a huge cop out, but I'd be okay with it. I think you'd have to go something original. And I think the reason you have to do that is because Square is struggling to attract the younger audience, and they need to give the younger audience a character that they can now grow up with, because all of the Final Fantasy fans that we have that are playing the Final Fantasy games are us, the people that grew up with it and are now adults. Like there's not a lot of the younger generation that is growing up with Final Fantasy because it's not what it used to be. Like you're talking about Final Fantasy games are coming out like 5 years apart. Like that's not
Yeah.
how it was. Like you got a new one every year because there was different teams that were working on it. So I think you need to make a new character. I think you need to start fresh. I think you need to get back to your roots. Um, I honestly think that if it wasn't for Clair Obscure Expedition 33, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If an old system game like that wasn't as successful as it was, it probably wouldn't have forced people to make changes. So I think there's a lot of moving pieces, but I'm very interested to see where it goes.